I think that ultimately cooler heads may prevail, but we could have a situation where somebody flips a switch when they're not supposed to, somebody gets a little trigger happy, but ultimately we'll have to see. I'm not really sure how this is going to play out. If it goes the way that it looks, surely there will be something much worse, perhaps a World War scenario, but I just can't even or don't want to even believe that it could happen.
Eric Sprott, Rick Rule, and Keith Newmeyer are three successful resource investors coming together for one simple reason: to buy cheap assets from distressed companies and seize this once-in-a-decade opportunity to buy gold, silver, and other mineral projects for pennies on the dollar. First Mining Finance Corp., trading on the TSX Venture under FF, a recently launched venture with the sole purpose to acquire advanced stage natural resource projects, and starting on day one with 18 projects, management has already identified over 60 additional projects to acquire. Learn more about First Mining Finance at futuremoneytrends.com/investright.
Hello everyone and welcome into crushthestreet.com. My name is Kenneth Amaduri and I'm joined today with David Quintieri. He's with themoneygps.com. He's got a very popular YouTube channel, also The Money GPS, and he's the author of multiple books. A very informative person, and a person, if you're able to handle the truth, that's actually giving it. So David, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on.
David, let's get right into exposing more of this truth. Obama had specifically promised that he would bring our troops home when he was running, and he's constantly talking about it. This was his mission, and now we're dealing with Obama putting boots on the ground in the Middle East. David, why is the U.S. provoking war?
Well, truthfully, this isn't the U.S., it's the military-industrial complex. They've been doing so, provoking war all across the Middle East, expanding into North Africa, expanding into different places of the world. They need to continue what they're doing, their policy of consistent war, even when it doesn't make sense at all. Now, as you've mentioned already, I just want to touch on a couple points. 2007, Obama was running on a campaign that said, if the troops are not home by the time I'm in office, that it will be the first job. It will be my first mission to get and bring our troops home. You can take that to the bank. Well, of course, not only did the troops stay in Iraq, but you had an expansion of the war there. And initially they would claim that they're contractors or advisors, but then next thing you know, that all expanded. And then you have Syria. A few years ago, they were actually insisting to go into Syria to topple the Assad regime. But they didn't get the public's opinions on this, and basically they opted to do this using ISIS instead. They've been funding ISIS through different means. They've been training them, they've been giving them weapons, and we know that this has been a fact. It's been released in many different instances, and we know that this will in fact be something that becomes uncontrollable even for the military-industrial complex, who is using this as a way to continue on with war. You create the boogeymen, build them up, and then you have to go in to take them out. This keeps the war machine going. That's their policy, at least at one level, is to continue to essentially increase what they call defense spending while buying bombs and dropping them on people.
Defense, freedom, all these words that are so palatable for the mainstream. David, when it comes to the elites and the military-industrial complex, is it okay just to have this war as it is, or are they going to escalate it into something larger, something like a World War III? I mean, are we going to see a potential draft? Do they want to take it to a much bigger level, or is it just kind of going to be the way we've been accustomed to the war over the last few years?
As of right now, it will remain as a proxy war. I don't see it expanding any further at this time. But what's happening with Syria specifically when Russia and Syria have both said we do not approve, we have not given any permission for the U.S. to conduct either airstrikes or ground and infantry scenarios within Syria. So right there, with the U.S. saying they're going to go in, and then you have Syria and Russia saying, actually, no, you're not going to go in, this presents a very, very dangerous scenario that could escalate from a proxy war of the U.S. using ISIS to fight their side, and then change that into a full-scale war. And that is very frightening to me. Now, I think that ultimately cooler heads may prevail, but we could have a situation where somebody flips a switch when they're not supposed to, or somebody gets a little trigger happy, but ultimately we'll have to see. I'm not really sure how this is going to play out. If it goes the way that it looks, surely there will be something much worse, perhaps a World War scenario, but I just can't even, or don't want to even believe that it could happen.
David, let's talk about the military-industrial complex. Who exactly is involved in that group, and how are they going to benefit from a war specifically? I mean, I know we can kind of vaguely understand how they will benefit, but can we kind of get a little deeper on who exactly will benefit and how they will benefit from a war escalating?
Well, on the surface level, we have those who benefit financially. So you have those who bankroll the different corporations. So anyone involved in that is obviously going to make a bigger profit if they're selling more bombs, more guns, and more machines that go along with this. You have a lot of technology that goes into these new weapons. And the technology companies obviously need semiconductors. They need all sorts of raw materials. So these are very important to keep it going. If the economy is dying, well, at least the war machine can continue. Anyone involved in any of the stocks that for these corporations are obviously going to look for increased corporate profits. How do you have increased corporate profits if there's peace in the world? Well, obviously that's not going to be the case. So these individuals are also related. Then you have, let's call them the intelligence industry, which benefits from this as well. The think tanks and all of these different advisors do, in fact, make profits from their advice, from their, their meetings and everything that they have. So individuals like, for example, Brzezinski, he sells books based on his advising techniques and his intelligence, and also his work that he's done with the government and what have you. These people are very important to the military-industrial complex. It's a generic term that's really an umbrella of everything underneath it. But these are just some of the things that we need to understand.
That's really interesting. And if I could play devil's advocate, somebody might hear that and go, you know what, there's just too many moving parts and too many disconnected parts that are only connected indirectly. And it would just be too much collusion for it to actually all work together and not just be known. And maybe you would just say that it is known and people are just being blinded. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I do agree in part with that. I would just like to say, for example, people say, JP Morgan is not involved in any criminality. You can't have a corporation that employs so many people and have them all be part of this activity. But you don't need to have that. In fact, all you need to control is the one at the top. If you can control the individual in the highest position of that corporation, that's all that needs to be complicit in these activities. Yeah. And this is going on with all different corporations. You can see how they do this. And anyway, it just basically goes to show you how easy it is to be done when they only need to control a small select few people, and they can do this by having them, for example, Bilderberg meeting, they all go there, they go back to their respective corporations or governments, and then they dish out what the policy is going to be.
Sticking with that same vein and talking about politicians and conflicts of interest, we know that politicians are essentially all backed by the same supporters. Is it fair to say that the debates are just simply a distraction of the truth and that they are all essentially one and the same?
100% yes. We have these debates all the time, every so many years, and they discuss them on TV. People watch, record-breaking amounts of people tuning in to see these debates to decide who should I vote for. But what they don't understand is who's bankrolling these politicians. And yes, when you looked at Mitt Romney and Obama, there were some different groups that were funding each side. But ultimately, when you look at it, financial corporations, major ones, were funding both sides. They don't care about this because they simply want to put their money, whoever will be complicit with their activities, that's where their money's going to go. They have them on this, basically on their team. Both sides of this equation work for the same people. You do not get voted in unless you are willing to do some dirty work. It's so amazing. I'm in Canada here, and we just had an election, and the Liberals or Democrats, they got in. And people really, truly in their hearts believed that by voting Liberal in, they are able to change the system. But that's not the way it is. And it doesn't mean that the Conservatives are going to do any better. You need to really look at who is funding them and understand that their policies are not created by the government. They're created by the corporations who fund them.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's the corporations that are really the ones controlling things, because when I listen to some of these politicians, regardless of whether or not I agree with them 100% or whatever, they do sound genuine. And I always take everything with a grain of salt, but I would imagine that some of the Republicans do believe in a smaller government, and the Democrats do believe in these socialist programs. But when it all comes down to it, what they do is ultimately controlled by the corporations, regardless of maybe what they actually feel inside. So, David, let's move on to the economy just a bit here. We've seen endless efforts to raise the debt ceiling, and it's something I think that people have become numb towards. But tell us, if you can, tell us how bad the current House agreement is to raise the debt ceiling that is supposed to last until March 2017.
Well, the reason, first of all, that it's going until 2017 is so that the elections can take place without any problems in the way. They want to be able to spend as much money as possible right now so that they can fix everything, make it look pretty for the government that comes into power in the next term. What I would say personally is let's stop pretending that there is a debt ceiling, get rid of it altogether, and let them print as much money and get into as much debt as they want. It's silly to every so often need to raise the debt ceiling knowing that they're just going to go to the very last minute. They're going to wait until there's a very serious situation. They're going to create another 100,000 pages of law that nobody's going to read, and then they're going to sign the bill, and that's it. It's all done. It's very silly. It tricks and fools the mainstream media, but ultimately, it hurts just to read the same thing over and over again about the debt ceiling, knowing that they're going to pass it and they're going to expand it to whatever level that they want. But ultimately, this just basically goes to show you how unimportant their facts that they're trying to bring to us are. We need to look into the deeper truth. Why exactly are they going into a deficit in the first place? They're constantly saying that they're saving money. Constantly. You hear that all the time. In Toronto, I hear this all the time. They saved you. They reduced taxes. And I have to say that why are we going into a bigger deficit every month after month? Explain that to me. Yeah. That's what nobody is able to answer.
Yeah, it really is just pointless to continue to act like this debt ceiling means anything. I guess it's some sort of check or appeared check that they say they're doing something to be fiscally responsible, but in the end they just end up raising it, and there's no real checks and balances of the money that's being spent. So David, according to the Fed, their likelihood of raising rates in December has gone up. Do you see this actually happening with the unemployment being underreported, the stock market being extremely volatile? Do you actually see the Fed raising rates the next time around?
Well, we've been hearing the same tune, the broken record playing over and over again here with the Federal Reserve. Will they raise rates? Will they hold off for now? What the general consensus I've found is that they're not going to do it for now. And I'm really on the fence about this. If they do increase rates, they're going to do so to, let's say 0.25%, which is not far off from where they are now. I do think that they can withstand this level at this point if they were to bring it up to there. I'm not saying that they will necessarily, but it could withstand that level. So we'll have to see. I don't really think, though, that they are ready for that. It doesn't seem like they are ready in any way, simply because even the Federal Reserve, who are complete liars, are at least admitting the fact that employment numbers are not doing so well. It's a little questionable there because they tend to use the economy being at full employment, which is a little silly, at the same time that they say we want to get those employment numbers up. But they look at the real statistics. What worries me is the reverse repo rate that we have noted ever since the beginning of 2014, 2015, which essentially means that the Federal Reserve has been bailing out banks. We don't know exactly who, of course, because none of their actions are transparent, but we know that they've been giving liquidity dramatically since 2014, 2015. What's going on here? I thought there was stability, but of course that is nothing of the sort.
Each minute that goes by, that 0.25% that the Fed might raise is more dramatic than it was the minute prior with a growing debt. I mean, and when the debt's 30 trillion, I mean, we're not going to be able to pay this back. And the significance of even the smallest rate hike as time goes on becomes more and more dire. So with this, David, you've done some interesting charts, and you've shown kind of where we are with the stock market and where we've been historically. With the stock market kind of making some major moves here in October, where do you see us right now, and do you see the potential for a collapse based on some historical data that you've kind of pointed out and basically where we are?
What I would look at is the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. If you want to know where the stock market will go, look at the Fed's balance sheet. If you want to know where the Fed's balance sheet is going to go, look at the stock market. They are directly corresponding. This shouldn't be the case, but they are in fact almost exactly the same. It's amazing to see these different statistics here, but look at the Fed's balance sheet. I've done videos about this before. I'm sure you've seen the facts as well. And you will see a direct correlation between the two. We should have these fundamentals in place which would affect the performance of the stock market. Generally, corporations or investors look at these different fundamentals. What are the employment rates? What are the imports and exports looking at? What about the shipping industries? What have you? And these obviously would affect if people are willing to invest money or not. But that is not the case anymore. It's how much money is the Federal Reserve printing. You can see the direct correlation. It is public information, and there are charts that I've showed on my YouTube channel and you've probably seen online, which basically show you that there is a direct correlation. When QE3 stopped, the stock market went sideways. That's just the way it is, because the Federal Reserve is supporting this. Low interest rates are supporting this. Bringing the interest rates up is going to be a very, very disastrous scenario ultimately that I don't think the market can withstand.
David, that's powerful information right there, and hopefully people will take what you said to heart and really do their own research and really consider the truth of the matter of what the powers that be really don't want us to know, and kind of sift through the mainstream media. And having said that, if anyone wants to be able to reach out to David, definitely visit his website, check out his YouTube channel, and also check out his books. David, if they want to find out more information about you and a little bit about what they would find, can you just give us a little closing on that?
For sure. So basically, I have the Money GPS YouTube channel, and I usually do a video approximately every day, and it covers the economy and politics and other things like that. So check me out on there. I do a lot of charts on there to look at, but what I do is employ a strategy I like to call zooming out. So we don't look at the facts directly. We try to understand what's happening here. We dissect, and I do so in about 10-minute videos or so. And my book is The Money GPS, where I've used a lot of charts and diagrams, little like cartoonish type diagrams, to make it simple for people to understand exactly what's going on, to get rid of this confusion that's there.
You're right. There's a lot of confusion out there, and you do a great job of being able to kind of make sense of it all, because there's just so many moving parts. And I think for the average person to be able to track everything, it's overwhelming. So, David, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show with me today. Let's do this again soon.
For sure. Thank you for having me on.